Homage to Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to Manjushri, homage to all the lineage masters. Profound and subtle dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we can follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate all sentient beings, please generate unsurpassed bodhicitta. Today we will continue our teaching on the Guhyagarbha Tantra, and we will also have a class tomorrow. When we study the Guhyagarbha Tantra, we discuss the 5 root samayas and the 10 branch samayas. Previously, we mentioned the samaya of not abandoning the 5 poisons within the Guhyagarbha Tantra. This means that within the samayas of Vajrayana, there is a commitment not to abandon the 5 poisons. Whether you can practice this depends on the strength of your mind and the power of your wisdom. Therefore, not everyone can realize the state of not abandoning desire, anger, and ignorance. So, according to their own system of the Guhyagarbha Tantra, when a practitioner reaches this high state, they observe this specific samaya. Yesterday, we already explained that the 5 afflictions, such as desire, anger, and ignorance, are actually the 5 wisdoms and the 5 Buddhas. I believe that all the practitioners present here should have understood this point very clearly. In the past, you might have read about this in Sutrayana teachings, such as the Platform Sutra and other related Buddhist materials. People often say that afflictions are awakening, and many love to repeat this phrase. However, why are afflictions awakening? Most people have never heard the actual theory behind it. When we say afflictions are themselves awakening, it is based on recognizing the nature of mind, because the nature of afflictions is awakening. When we studied the finding comfort and ease in the nature of mind, especially in the instructions on the 3 bases and 3 virtues, we specifically discussed the nature of afflictions. That is to say, before you recognize their nature, afflictions remain as afflictions. But once you recognize their true nature, they can be called the 5 Buddhas or the 5 wisdoms. So this is a crucial point. And I see that the number of people attending this secret mantra class is quite large compared to when I first taught the general overview of the Guhyagarbha Tantra. Even so, looking at the total number of people who wish to study the secret mantra, this current group is actually just a small portion left after multiple rounds of qualification checks. Right now, students online and within Larunga are listening to this teaching. For those who are receiving this secret mantra teaching, I hope you don't think that listening to it just once is enough. This time, we have exceptionally allowed review sessions within Larangar. I heard that some classes and practitioners did not attend them. I am not quite sure what the specific issues or reasons were. Nevertheless, I truly believe that through this course you should gain a fresh understanding of the view, meditation, conduct, and result of secret mantra. Today, many people pursue the secret mantra, but very few truly understand it. In the Han region, many people seek empowerments and secret teachings. They constantly claim to be a disciple of the secret mantra vehicle. Even among Buddhists abroad, those who follow the secret mantra are in the majority. However, very few people understand the principles of the Guhyagarbha Tantra that we are studying. Perhaps the teachers who can explain it are very limited, and the audience who can listen and fully comprehend its profound meaning is also rare. I'm not saying this just to boast or exaggerate. We live in an information age, and in our current society, you can see major global events instantly every single day. It requires very little effort, which is completely different from the past. In this era where global information is so easily accessible, you can observe the secret mantra practitioners around you. I don't say this to praise ourselves and criticize others, but if we are being completely fair and objective about it, a lot of people just chant a few mantras, or they simply take refuge with a Tibetan Buddhist tantric guru. Without any genuine knowledge, let alone Dzogchen view, most people are completely ignorant about even the Mahayoga view. Some people even completely misunderstand the secret mantra, thinking it's just a way to satisfy their sensory desires like their attachment, aversion, and ignorance. They believe that in secret mantra you can eat meat, marry, kill, drink, and smoke. Therefore, many people who want to study Buddhism but also want to be reckless and are unwilling to keep the pratimoksha vows view this as a green light. They tell themselves that this is what the teaching means. However, we all know the reality of such behavior now. Through our current study of the essence of clear light, we can see that the profound conduct taught in secret mantra doesn't contradict the Vinaya Sutra at all, which means it perfectly aligns with the precepts in both Han and Tibetan Buddhist traditions. If we fail to learn this proper explanation of the secret mantra, we will never understand the profound and ultimate essence of the Buddha Dharma. I believe many wise people will gain a correct and positive understanding through this study. Of course, for a few individuals, due to their past karmic connections, or perhaps because they struggle a bit to understand these deep teachings, among other reasons, they might end up confusing a lot of what's written in the text. They might not even interpret what I say each day in a correct light. If someone approaches teachings with a negative bias, let alone a teacher like me, even the teachings of the realized Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will be distorted by their wrong views and perverse thoughts, leading them astray. This kind of thing has continuously happened throughout history. Therefore, I think everyone here should repeatedly and deeply contemplate every single line of Jumipham Rinpoche's Vajra speech. My teaching this time is neither too detailed nor too brief. But since we are only going through this once, you might not catch everything right away. The most important thing is for you to keep thinking it over and digesting it on your own afterward. The amount of effort you put in your study now will determine your final realization and stable conviction. This will bring you lasting benefits. Thinking back to my own days as a student, I remember spending a huge amount of time studying pramana. Now, whenever I open those texts, I feel a deep connection because I poured a lot of time and energy into them. It's the same with the Guhyagarbha Tantra and Dzogchen. I put so much time into them. So whenever I look at these Dharma books, I can really feel that I've truly put the hours in. And because of that, I feel I have at least a little bit of personal realization to share. Therefore, I am not holding anything back this time, and I am trying my best to share everything I understand with all of you. Next, let us move on to today's topic. The second point is, second, if the 5 afflictions are taken as the path through skillful means, wisdom arises. Yesterday we explained that the 5 afflictions, such as desire, anger, and ignorance, are actually the 5 Buddhas or the 5 wisdoms if you recognize their true nature. Furthermore, if you take them as the path through skillful means, wisdom will manifest. This is analyzed on the relative level from the perspective of pure valid cognition. When we evaluate things through pure valid cognition, afflictions can be transformed into wisdom if they are embraced by skillful means. The verse states, "Worldliness is pacified when there is no desire, yet accomplishing mudra occurs when there is." Generally speaking, how does our supreme teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, guide and liberate sentient beings? He tames the endless sentient beings in the world by teaching them to be free from desire, anger, arrogance, and the rest of the 5 poisons. However, the ultimate fruit of accomplishing mudra is actually achieved by relying on desire. Does this sound contradictory? No, it does not. In Buddhism, one approach to helping and liberating sentient beings is to completely eliminate desire. Yet another approach relies on desire to achieve accomplishment, so both cases exist. Thus, as pointed out, according to this world, desire attachment is considered to be a great fault, and although it is taught that if there is no desire, the mind can be tamed, the sutras have already explained this very clearly. Generally speaking, they teach worldly beings about all kinds of faults that come with desire. They teach that desire is like a blazing fire that can destroy both oneself and others. They say desire is like a crowd of Rakshasa demons, and anyone who falls into it will be swallowed alive. They also warn that desire is like an iron hook, and anyone caught by it can never escape. There are countless teachings describing the heavy faults of desire. For such ordinary beings, the Buddha tames them through the path of non-desire. This is how Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and even certain practitioners in Vajrayana attain realization, which is a perfectly valid path. There are occasions when being without desire is unacceptable. So does that mean you can't have any desire in any kind of spiritual practice? Not at all. Under specific circumstances, it becomes indispensable. Actually, when we study the Buddha Dharma, we truly need to listen and learn extensively. Without extensive learning, if you only study 1 or 2 sutras or read only 1 or 2 commentaries, you will never grasp the profound, true meaning of Buddhism. This is true not only for Buddhism, but also for worldly books. For instance, if I were a researcher in the natural sciences, I would need to understand many ancient and modern theories, including what Eastern scientists say and the background of Western culture. You need to understand all of these things. If you don't, and yet you blindly consider yourself a natural scientist, you actually don't know much about it at all. In that case, you wouldn't really have the ground to speak, and you'd lack real expertise. This is very important. So nowadays, many people studying Buddhism don't really study broadly enough. Please do not pretend to be a representative of the teaching when you know so little. I remember attending a seminar at a university in Hong Kong once. A lot of them were said to be PhD students in religious studies, but they didn't really seem to understand religion at all, and they knew even less about Buddhism. But because they thought to themselves, I am a PhD student, they felt like they had the authority and ought to have something to say. In reality, let alone real spiritual realization, they did not even understand basic Buddhist theory. Unfortunately, there are so many people like this nowadays. Therefore, I believe that if I want to speak on behalf of the natural or social sciences, I should have read, studied, and really mastered at least 100 books first. Only then might I have the ground to say something. So, looking at how things are now, some Buddhists read just one sutra or a tiny bit of the teachings and then try to speak for the whole of Buddhism. That probably won't work. Even if we just want to speak for a single person, fully conveying their words and inner thoughts is already very difficult. Take a company as an example. If a regular employee tries to explain what the chairman really means, they will likely struggle to grasp his true intent. I hope everyone understands this point. Buddhism certainly teaches that one can attain accomplishment without desire. Nevertheless, there are also times when desire is absolutely indispensable. For those who possess samaya, according to outer mantra, if the mind has no affliction for the consort explained to be the designated deity, siddhis will not be received. In Vajrayana, there are outer tantras, including Kriya, Charya, and Yoga Tantra. Within these, when practitioners who hold the samaya vows are meditating, they visualize a deity like Tara, or work with a mentally created deity. They must give rise to a specific, focused intent toward this wisdom deity. Whether it is a Yidam deity or the Buddha, when we visualize them, we generate a form of attachment toward them, just as we discussed yesterday. In reality, this means completely accepting the deity and focusing your mind entirely on them. It is a state of deep meditative concentration. If you lack this intense mental focus, you will never gain any spiritual accomplishment. Therefore, in the outer tantras, desire is not completely abandoned right from the beginning. If you did not have any desire or aspiration at all, you would not even have the wish to seek the Dharma, nor would you have the motivation to receive spiritual accomplishments. According to inner mantra, if the mind lacks great passion for the physical consort, then wisdom and siddhis will not be attained. This is especially true based on what is taught in the inner tantras. When you reach the generation stage and completion stage, especially during the completion stage, you sometimes need a physical consort. In other words, you need the wisdom of a dakini. Without a great passion for her, the co-emergent wisdom of great bliss cannot arise. Therefore, you will fail to attain wisdom, as stated in several tantras. Moreover, for certain spiritual capacities, some yogis must rely exactly on this method to give rise to co-emergent great bliss. For instance, some past tertons absolutely had to rely on a physical consort. Without a physical consort, certain terma teachings of the non-duality of bliss and emptiness would remain hidden within the unborn wisdom. This unborn wisdom can only be unlocked by relying on a very special, skillful method. Therefore, there are indeed specific secret mantra paths that rely on a physical consort to achieve enlightenment. Likewise, it is taught that if there is no desire, the siddhis of the consort will not be accomplished. So, these types of siddhis and realizations simply cannot be accomplished without desire. This is why the amount of desire that exists will determine how much bliss increases in the minds of those in the desire realm whose faculties are suitable to attain siddhis. The amount of bliss sustained through methods will indicate how great waves of wisdom will become evident. So within the desire realm, some people with strong desire actually have the right capacity on the surface. When these conditions come together and their desire increases, the wisdom of great bliss born from that very desire also grows. If this wisdom of great bliss is guided by skillful methods and held by the view of non-dual purity and evenness, then at that very moment they will truly manifest ultimate wisdom. This is like adding firewood to increase a fire, or like eating poison increases a peacock's luster. This means that when you add more and more wood to a fire, the flames naturally blaze higher and higher. Similarly, while poison is deadly and harmful to other creatures, it does not hurt a peacock at all. Instead, it makes the bird's feathers even more brilliant, vibrant, and beautiful. So, in our world, there are actually two different situations. One situation brings harm to the growth of certain things, but on the other hand, it acts as a condition that actually helps other things grow. Therefore, when it comes to desire, the Hinayana tradition certainly says that when desire and anger arise, they create obstacles to liberation. It's not that Vajrayana doesn't know this. Vajrayana understands it completely and goes a step further. We simply have to acknowledge the incredible value of these Vajrayana skillful means. Likewise, depending on whether they are sustained through methods or not, all afflictions will serve as contributing circumstances for either developing qualities or faults, while the nature of the afflictions will not differ. The rest of the afflictions, such as arrogance and anger, or any of the other four poisons, can be transformed if they are sustained by the wisdom of non-dual purity and evenness. When held by this view, these afflictions become a source of great qualities. However, if they are not sustained by this view, they will inevitably produce faults. So there is no difference in the external object itself. For instance, if I see an enemy and give rise to genuine anger toward them, when that anger arises, the enemy is the object condition, which is simply my focal object. If my mind stream is sustained by the wisdom of non-dual evenness and purity, then my anger toward him will be completely transformed into pure wisdom, and it will not increase my afflictions. But if this anger is not sustained by the wisdom of non-dual evenness and purity, and it just arises as an ordinary affliction, then letting that anger arise will destroy all my accumulated merit. From the side of the external object, there is no difference at all, whether it's a so-called enemy or any other external object. Yet, because our spiritual realization differs, our actual experience of that external object changes completely. Therefore, many practitioners have very weak practice, so everyone they see appears bad or wicked. This shows that, let alone using skillful means like non-dual evenness and purity, they lack even basic mindfulness, awareness, and pure perception. If your practice is even a little bit better, no matter what your surroundings are like, you will live very happily. You will not find other people's behavior annoying, and you can get along with anyone. In fact, people who truly practice well can be comfortable with just about anything. Take eating as an example. When someone's practice is weak, they complain that this dish tastes bad or that dish is awful. They become extremely picky and everything feels wrong to them. They find everything uncomfortable, thinking, this doesn't work and that doesn't work either. They feel like their clothes aren't good enough, the food isn't good enough, and the place isn't good enough. The entire external world becomes an object of their constant complaints. However, if your practice improves even a little bit, everything becomes a cause for great bliss. Even when you face the most challenging adversity, you can completely transform it into the path using skillful means. So whether your practice is good or not, in the end, it really comes down to the difference in your inner state. Therefore, in this context, poison makes a peacock's plumage look even more magnificent and beautiful when it eats it. Yet, if a crow or another bird eats that same poison, it will drop dead on the spot. It is the exact same principle here. Desire works the same way. If it arises in the mind stream of an ordinary person, whether you use the secret mantra as an excuse or not, as long as you generate ordinary desire and lack the proper antidote, you will certainly create negative karma and face heavy consequences. However, if it is sustained by genuine wisdom, everything changes. To be clear, being sustained by this wisdom is not as easy as we might think. Many people mistakenly assume they are advanced practitioners, believing that simply visualizing emptiness for a brief moment is enough. But things don't actually work that way, and this is a very big blind spot. Because for someone who lacks wisdom and yet tries to practice emptiness and these skillful means, it is dangerous. They will only end up destroying themselves and others. In this way, although it is caught that desire for material objects is attachment, having interest in the doctrine that leads to enlightenment is not considered to be attachment. Due to the differences of the object and the characteristic, their functions change, while the way in which the strength of the mind engages with its object remains the same. Generally speaking, a desire generated toward samsaric things, toward defiled phenomena, is what we actually call desire attachment. But if you give rise to a form of desire or an intense yearning toward the pure phenomenon of nirvana, that is not desire attachment, it is a form of wisdom. Yet the aspects of the characteristic here are definitely different, and the objects themselves are entirely different. One focuses on what is pure, while the other focuses on what is impure. This aligns with the explanations in The Ornament of Clear Realization, where both the objects and the characteristic differ. The object of desire attachment is totally distinct from the object of spiritual yearning. When some people develop an attachment or a profound joy toward the Buddha, it is a completely different state of mind. We can definitely say that the desire towards samsaric and defiled things is worlds apart from the desire for the undefiled state of nirvana. Their functions are absolutely opposite. One creates the cause for cyclic existence, causing you to instantly wander in samsara. That is what happens when you have desire for worldly things. But if you have desire for nirvana, it actually becomes the cause for liberation. Even though it's still an attachment, it actually leads to liberation. Some people often say, do not grasp, do not grasp. You shouldn't cling to anything, just let go, see through it, and drop everything. But actually, that way of thinking doesn't quite make sense. Before we have reached the realization where subject and object dissolve into the Dharma Dhatu, what do we still need? We still need virtuous thoughts toward the pure qualities of nirvana, for example, generating renunciation, bodhicitta, non-dual wisdom, faith, and great compassion. These are completely necessary while we are still on the path. At the same time, we should do our best to restrain the wrong views, desire and anger, and all those harmful afflictions in our mind. We have to do this because we still have the discrimination of subject and object. Once all of that is entirely gone, then these things will neither help nor harm. But the fact is, we haven't reached that state yet. Therefore, although their effects are completely different, apart from that, whether it's desire for worldly things or a spiritual yearning, both involve the mind moving, focusing on an object, and grasping it. From the perspective of how the mind works, they are completely the same. Yesterday, when we discussed desire attachment, we asked why it is considered wisdom. The reason is the all-observing wisdom also has this very same characteristic. And what we're talking about here belongs to the all-observing wisdom, right? Yes. This principle is taught within sutra as well. So this principle that qualities can arise based on desire is not something unique to the secret mantra tradition. In fact, as I've mentioned before, Mipham Rinpoche's The Essence of Clear Light is completely necessary for many people today who only want to study the sutras but tend to have certain views or don't quite understand Vajrayana. It is highly necessary for them because the instructions found here actually use the pith instructions of secret mantra to explain the profound meaning of the sutras. A commentary like this is really something that has never existed since ancient times. It's fair to say it is extremely rare in history. Here Mipham Rinpoche quotes a stanza from the sutra requested by Sagaramati. It states in the sutra requested by Sagaramati, the amount of hay put on a fire will determine how the fire's strength will increase. The amount of passion a bodhisattva has will determine how the fire of prajna will increase. It says it right here very clearly. Just like when you add more and more grass to a fire, the fire gets bigger and the flames go higher. Everyone knows this. In the exact same way, the more afflictions a bodhisattva has, the more the fire of their wisdom increases. But at this point, many people might find this hard to accept. How can having more afflictions make your wisdom grow even more? Does that mean the bigger a person's afflictions, the greater their realization? Actually, this makes perfect sense. This isn't just a claim in Tibetan Buddhism. This sutra is also in the Chinese Buddhist canon. In the Chinese canon, it's titled The Sutra of the Questions of Bodhisattva Sagaramati. It was translated during the Song dynasty by Dharmaraksha and his team. I have checked the Chinese Tripitaka, and you can find the text in the Chinese version. This quote can be found there word for word. It is right there in the Chinese canon. So when it's convenient for you, you should definitely take a look. This is a classical sutra text. But without the pith instructions of secret mantra, if you ask many sutra practitioners to explain this, it would be very difficult for them. The sutra text explicitly says, the more grass you add to a fire, the brighter the flames blaze. As a bodhisattva's afflictions grow heavier, the fire of their wisdom of selflessness blazes all the more powerfully. We can use this to discuss with others. When they have certain views about how things are in secret mantra, We can ask them how they would explain this passage from the sutras. For those people, you can first bring up the sutra texts. Doesn't the sutra tradition usually say that a bodhisattva's wisdom grows stronger after afflictions are eliminated? Then why does it say this here? This is a very good point to talk about. Today, a lay practitioner sent me a message saying that he found a scriptural reference for the statement, afflictions are awakening. He forwarded a passage from the Sutra on the non-origination of all dharmas. After reading it, I can say that yes, actually, the Sutra on the non-origination of all dharmas is the Sutra on the non-action of all dharmas. Previously, when I was translating the text for Finding Comfort and Ease in the Nature of Mind, the title cited inside was The Sutra on the Non-Origination of All Dharmas. Both the Sutra on the Non-Origination of All Dharmas and the Sutra on the Non-Action of All Dharmas are acceptable titles. In this text, it also states, desire attachment is nirvana, anger and delusion are the same. Within these three matters, there resides the boundless way of the Buddha. I recall there being a stanza exactly like that. Just now, while we were chatting about the construction work at the academy, I saw a text that someone sent me. There are honestly so many stanzas like this in the scriptures, so if you actually look through the sutras, you'll see they are everywhere. Look at attachment, anger, and ignorance. Desire itself is actually nirvana. Desire itself is completely pure. And it is not only desire, anger and delusion are exactly the same. Right inside greed, anger, and ignorance, inside these three poisons, you can find the endless path of the Buddha. When you say it that way, a lot of people might get completely confused. How could the infinite path of the Buddha be found right inside desire, anger, and ignorance? They feel it only makes sense if it's found inside precepts, concentration, and wisdom, so how could it be inside desire and anger? That's why many people nowadays aren't really going to get it, because the Buddha's teachings are so profound and vast. Therefore, from the text of the sutra vehicle, as I just mentioned, this can be found in the 6th volume of the Sutra of the Questions of the Bodhisattva Sagaramati. When you have some spare time, please look it up. This quote is in the 6th volume. You should look into this carefully. This covers the second point. If they are sustained by skillful means, then these afflictions like desire manifest as wisdom. Third, it is as taught. If sustained with the realization, they become the nature of wisdom. By fixation upon all appearances as ordinary and conceptualization, by holding to a self and phenomena as true, the strength of the mind arises as the 5 poisons. When we conceptualize all appearances and view them as completely ordinary and mundane, like thinking a mountain is just a mountain or a stone is just a stone, then for anyone who still clings to a self of persons and a self of phenomena, what does the creative power of the mind bring out? It just brings out the 5 poisons. Generally speaking, when we have no practice at all and just remain in an ordinary state, we cling tightly to a self and to things. For people who have such heavy attachment, the creative power of the mind really does manifest as the 5 poisons like greed and anger. And because they rely on these 5 poisons, they create all kinds of karma, which ultimately causes them to keep wandering within the 6 realms of rebirth. Conversely, when one sees that phenomena are pure and that the intrinsic nature of self and phenomena lacks true existence, everything is seen as evenness, free from all conceptual focus based on characteristics. At that time, when any of the 5 aspects of the strength of awareness arise, that will be wisdom. When we rely on the pith instructions of the Guru, or rely on the commentaries written by past great masters, we come to know that all phenomena are originally pure and equal. Within this realization, neither a self nor phenomena exist. All things concerning the so-called self and what belongs to the self are accomplished as nothing whatsoever, remaining free from all characteristics. Within such a state of supreme evenness and purity, absolutely everything that appears at that moment is nothing but the creative power of awareness. At this stage, whatever manifests is wisdom. For example, if I am an ordinary person who sees everything as mundane, then the objects around me will only become causes for greed, anger, and ignorance. For instance, just looking at a red pillar, all the 5 poisons could arise. Or if the object is a person, I might feel greed toward them, or anger toward them, or jealousy, arrogance, and ignorance. Just toward one single person, I can generate all of these. However, if my mind stream has the view of non-dual purity and evenness, then even though that person still appears before me just as before, what actually arises within my mind stream will be entirely the creative power of the five wisdoms. Nothing else will ever arise. So you can see how important it is to examine our own mind stream. For example, if a pleasing object is noticed, then those who are ordinary will, through fixation upon object and subject, develop attachment. Those who can endure hardship will, from the perspective of seeing this as unpleasant and so forth, reverse the mind of attachment. To illustrate this, he provides an example here. Suppose there is a person, whether a man or a woman. If I am just an ordinary person, I will look at them and give rise to desire. I will think about how attractive they are, how beautifully they dress, how fine their skin is, or how wonderful it would be if I could possess them, and so on. We will constantly keep creating this mindset of splitting things into object and subject. But what if I am a practitioner who has spent many years meditating on the skeleton and the impurity of the body? The person in front of me remains exactly the same. Yet within my mind stream I will see that they are merely wrapped in a layer of skin, while inside there is only muscle, pus, blood, bones, and marrow, which is completely impure and has nothing substantial at all. When looking at a person, they seem like nothing more than a pile of white bones, leaving nothing to crave or cling to. Not only will no desire or attachment arise toward them, but one might even feel a deep sense of aversion. Yet it is the exact same person. Before people of different realizations, they manifest in such completely different ways. Here, the arising of concepts is encouraged without attempting to stop them. When sustained by the mind that realizes the nature just as it is, the appearance of subject and object as well as the experience of bliss will not only be unceasing, there will be an unimpeded experience free from conceptual reference points. This is desire arising as discerning wisdom. In the examples just mentioned, one was the ordinary person, before whom object and subject appear, giving rise to regular desire. The second was the ascetic, before whom a skeleton appears. Desire will not arise because it is extinguished right then and there, but they lack higher realization of wisdom. In the secret mantra, if you have these pith instructions, when a very beautiful object appears right before you, first of all, you don't need to deliberately suppress or block it. You just let whatever thoughts arise stay as they are. When looking at the person in front of you, you don't react like an ordinary person who intentionally clings and feels greed toward them. Nor do you react like a practitioner who analyzes and breaks them down until they turn into something you hate. There is no need for that either. At the very moment you feel attraction or cling to them, you guide that with the wisdom of non-dual purity and evenness. At that time, even though within your experience both the object and the wisdom of the mind appear, and because the object is beautiful, a natural, unceasing feeling of bliss will be present. Yet, there is absolutely no clinging to the object. Instead, a completely clear and unobstructed awareness manifests. This is actually a highly profound pith instruction within the secret mantra. It is not like in the sutras where you deliberately block it, thinking, I generated desire today, this is so painful. Nor is it like what is taught in some Hinayana schools where you intentionally meditate on the skeleton or continuously use loving kindness to counter anger. It is not like that at all. When this mind arises quite naturally, according to the pith instructions of Dzogchen, you look directly at its nature right in that moment. Or if we look at it from the perspective of Mahayoga, you look slightly with the wisdom of primordial purity and original evenness. When this specific mindset arises, you look at how its nature is ultimately pure and how it is empty. At that point, though you have made no deliberate effort to suppress it, since the appearance itself does not cease, wisdom wells up quite naturally. There is neither a particular clinging nor a particular attempt to block it. This is precisely the all-discerning wisdom. When we truly understand this, we see that the Vajrayana approach does not rely on deliberate suppression, deliberate antidotes, or deliberate forceful control. There is none of that. Instead, whenever an affliction arises, you rely on this pith instruction to look straight into its nature. When you do that, quite naturally, as they say in Dzogchen, a completely clear awareness naturally flows out. In that very moment, all of those afflictions are completely gone. Therefore, for many who practice the secret mantra, how they counter afflictions is truly different from the Hinayana approach, because this remedy is incredibly effective. For example, when your anger becomes exceptionally severe, if you try to control it with ordinary methods, it is very hard to keep in check. But the moment you observe its true nature, all confusion dissolves instantly, as if nothing was ever there. Whether it is greed or jealousy, because it is a state of mind that doesn't exist at all, its nature is pure, completely inseparable from the creative power of wisdom. And if you examine this nature further, it is indeed empty. So, emptiness and purity are non-dual and inseparable. Every one of us can experience this. There is no need to ask anyone else. When you use what Buddhism teaches to look slightly at your own mind, you will see that no conventional psychologist can ever do this. They have never understood this in the past, and they cannot do it now. That is why many Western scientists try so hard to study it, but in the end they still get completely stuck. This is why the psychologist Carl Jung praised the Tibetan Book of the Dead so highly. Also, I recently saw a record of a conversation between him and a Tibetan Rinpoche. During their dialogue, they both came to the conclusion that there are certain states of mind that scientists simply cannot find, yet they are clearly found within Tibetan Buddhism, which left him very satisfied. So saying this today is not about praising ourselves. The reality is that only by relying on pith instructions can you truly understand the nature of the mind, since objects are unceasing, distinct, blissful, and clear. Because when you don't intentionally force yourself to suppress it, the object before you remains unceasing and distinct. It doesn't vanish, nor does it get muddled up. Instead, it carries this quality where clarity and bliss are completely one. In Vajrayana, especially in Dzogchen, this is what we call the non-duality of bliss and emptiness. This bliss is actually the wisdom of great bliss. Actually, this great bliss is the creative power of Buddha nature and of emptiness. This wisdom of non-dual purity and evenness is already within every single one of us. People just haven't recognized it yet. This applies to the other afflictions as well. We used desire as our example just now, but when any of the other 5 poisons arise, the exact same principle applies the moment you look at their true nature. You will see that you don't need to deliberately block your thoughts the way they do in the sutras. It is completely unnecessary. A truth such as this is explained only in mantras upadeshas for taking afflictions as the path, yet sutra does give some indication of how afflictions abide as this nature. In the secret mantra, we say afflictions are enlightenment, while the sutras only say the nature of afflictions is enlightenment. But how do you recognize this? How do you practice it directly? And what is the actual reason why afflictions are enlightenment? The sutras do not explain, they just mention that the nature of afflictions is enlightenment, leaving it as something very simple. So many who only study the sutras do not understand what it means at all. If you talk to practitioners of the sutra tradition, well, anyone who has studied the Platform Sutra of the 6th Patriarch should be familiar with this idea, right? Actually, I also talked quite a lot about this right here not long ago. The sutra tradition does indeed explain it this way. How do the sutras explain that the nature of afflictions is enlightenment? In the Sutra of the Mudra, Engaging Through the Power of Faith, it states, wisdom is not other than the intrinsic nature of affliction. Apart from the nature of afflictions, there is no other wisdom. The intrinsic nature of affliction itself is wisdom. The nature of all afflictions is itself wisdom. See? The sutra vehicle puts it very clearly. This stanza is right there in the Chinese Buddhist canon, though the text is known by a slightly different title. In the canon, it's called the Sutra of the Dharma Gate of Entering the Mudra of the Power of Faith. It seems to have been translated back in the Northern Wei dynasty by a translator named Dharmaruchi. This sutra states, that is, the nature of wisdom is the nature of affliction. The nature of affliction is the nature of wisdom. Because the nature of wisdom is not different from the nature of affliction, and the nature of affliction is not different from the nature of wisdom. This is fundamentally the same as what we are looking at here. The nature of wisdom is affliction, and the nature of affliction is wisdom. Wisdom cannot be separated from affliction, and affliction cannot be separated from wisdom. If it is explained like this, those who only study the sutras might be lost. They will wonder, How can wisdom be affliction? And some people might completely misunderstand this word wisdom here. They might think that within the afflictions of greed, anger, and ignorance, it means the cleverness of greed. That because greed also has a quality of clear awareness, it is called the wisdom of greed. It is highly likely that many people will explain it completely wrong, but the wisdom being talked about here is actually the wisdom of selflessness. This wisdom of selflessness is actually affliction. The sutras only state that the nature of wisdom is affliction, that the nature of wisdom is affliction. Yet in most sutra traditions, people dare not speak this way. They think, how could the nature of wisdom be affliction? Affliction is ignorance, and ignorance is delusion. How can delusion be wisdom? Wisdom is the wisdom of selflessness. Many people understand the two to be just like darkness and light. So it is only when you study the secret mantra that you realize, yes, this is indeed how it is. The secret mantra has many pith instructions that are not taught in the sutras. You should understand this difference. As I teach the Guhya Garbha Tantra this time, I also feel that for many people these are indeed new teachings that they've never heard before. Otherwise, Buddhists can be very pitiful. They really want to learn, but well, the reality is that so many people completely misunderstand the teachings of Buddhism. Some people develop wrong views simply because they don't understand the Dharma. There are indeed cases like that. Because they don't understand the Dharma, some practice entirely wrong or understand completely wrong. Such things do happen. Therefore, as Buddhists, we must engage in long-term broad study and reflection. Looking at those of us listening to the Guhya Garbha Tantra this time, I see that many lay practitioners living in the cities have finished all 500,000 preliminary practices over the past few years. This time, I specifically allowed them to listen. This is truly rare and precious. For us here at the Academy, because we have little else to do except for serve the Sangha and practice, completing the 500,000 preliminary practices is not something very rare, and there isn't much to do outside of dedicated service and practice, but for those in the cities to have been practicing very steadily all these years is truly rare and precious. I hope you will keep on studying and reflecting. There is no such thing as being satisfied. It is best to study the sutras and the tantras as much as possible throughout your entire life. If you do this, I feel that your life will truly have meaning. You see, studying Buddhism is completely different from learning worldly knowledge. With worldly studies, you finish elementary school, you graduate from college, and you're done. But when it comes to studying Buddhism, if your causes, conditions, and merit are sufficient, you should still try your best to listen to more teachings of the sutras and tantras. The more you learn, the more profound and meaningful your life becomes. Now, let's move on to the second point. Not discarding the 5 ambrosias or nectars. We briefly introduced the 5 nectars yesterday. Among the branch samayas of the secret mantra, there is this vow of not discarding the 5 nectars. How should we understand this? When people hear the word nectar, it sounds beautiful, but the actual substances are considered highly impure by conventional standards. So why are we told not to reject them? Does practicing Vajrayana mean you have to accept these things? Some people might wonder. But in reality, from the perspective of our traditions and habits, things like human flesh are indeed a bit unclean. However, when analyzed from the perspective of secret mantra theory or practice, for those who have subtle attachments, there are times when these should not be discarded. It doesn't mean that everyone has to accept them. It is not that meaning. From the perspective of evenness, the notions of clean and dirty are indivisible, with nothing to discard. This fundamental evenness is viewed from the ultimate perspective of emptiness. From the standpoint of emptiness, everything is fundamentally non-existent. Take the human flesh mentioned here, or the beef and pork we normally enjoy eating. In reality, they do not exist at all in their essence. Not even a single speck of dust is established. The concept of clean cannot be established, and neither can unclean. When you use emptiness and the root wisdom of Madhyamaka to look closely, how could both clean and unclean be established? They don't stand up at all. So because their very essence is empty and unestablished, on the relative level, there is no need to reject these 5 nectars. It is not established from the very beginning, just like clouds and mist. Since they have no solid reality, how can you discard it? There is no way to discard it. If you insist on discarding them, it would be like trying to banish the son of a barren woman. It makes no sense. Given that they are pure, they are objects to accept. When looking from the perspective of the valid cognition of pure vision within conventional reality, if we speak from the side of purity, then in front of the Aryas who have realized emptiness, human flesh, and what we consider clean meat are actually no different. It is all just our conceptual thoughts. For example, Tibetans think dog meat is very bad. Traditionally, they dislike and avoid it. But there are also many other ethnic groups that like to eat it very much, and there are even restaurants specialized in serving it. And by utilizing the five ambrosias without the notions of clean or dirty, evenness is experienced. For some practitioners, especially for those who have realized emptiness, there is no clean or unclean. They are just experiencing evenness. For these practitioners, by suppressing conceptual thoughts regarding characteristics, siddhis are swiftly attained through fearless conduct. When a practitioner reaches this level of realization, everything, clean or unclean, is experienced as completely non-dual and equal. Before they had realized it, they thought some meat was clean and some meat was unclean, and some water was clean and some water was unclean. Such attachments and such conceptual thoughts need to be suppressed. Therefore, by relying on some careless behaviors, they can attain realization in a very short time. When sustained by skillful means, those substances are transformed into the nectar of the world. If he uses the skillful view and meditation of the non-duality of purity and equality to maintain this, then urine, feces, and meat, which were originally considered very dirty in the world, will change in their essence into clean nectar. Given that the ambrosia's nature abides as the substance of accomplishment, they are to be accepted. That is because the nature of these things abides as the substance of accomplishment we should accept. Why is that? For example, regarding the five nectars mentioned earlier, for every single substance, its elements and its essence can actually serve many purposes. They can be used as medicine, and they can even become the cause that sparks wisdom within you. So, out of habit, we think these are very unclean, but actually, whether speaking from emptiness or from manifest purity, in reality they have their own power, their own accomplishment, and their own merit. Because of this, some yogis purposefully do this to break their previous attachments. Originally, because of our attachments, there is a huge difference between unclean things and clean things. To break such conceptual thoughts, they intentionally use and consume unclean things. During the process of consuming it, because there are no conceptual thoughts, in his state, these two can become equality. Therefore, everyone should know this. Siddhi arises from acting in accordance with the teachings. Therefore, one should make nectar offerings at all times without interruption. For some intermediate practitioners, when they are to receive certain siddhis, it is necessary to accept this kind of nectar, relying on the teachings of the past Vidyadhara gurus. This necessity does not mean that everyone needs to make offerings or everyone needs to do this. It is only for some people. What kind of people? Those who are just beginning to practice the conduct of a shramana do not need this. It is simply beyond their level, so they should not practice it. At the other end, those who have achieved the highest realization and recognize the primordial purity of Dzogchen have no need for the five nectars either. But for practitioners in the middle who engage in careless behaviors, this is exactly how they unlock their wisdom. So for them, it is a must. If the profound meaning is not realized, and this conduct is recklessly engaged, such careless conduct could damage the mind. You see, it is explained very clearly here. If you have not realized the wisdom of the non-duality of purity and evenness, and yet you casually and recklessly start doing these things, that is a truly careless and terrifying way to act. Of course, there are two kinds of careless behavior. One kind is only careless on the surface, but in reality, the person has already attained inner realization. For instance, remember when Patrul Rinpoche went to a certain place to perform consciousness transference? All along on the surface, he seemed like a crazy person and also like a sick patient. Many herders saw him and said, he was here yesterday and he is still here today. They said, this sick person is so pitiful, it must be a contagious disease. Many herders said, what are you doing? And did not dare to go close. Patrul Rinpoche joked, there is no harm if you come close to me. Although I am a patient with a contagious disease, as for this illness of mine, I have been in contact with many people before, but only two people caught it. One is Nyoshu Lungtok and the other is Gyalme Wangpo. Only the two of them caught this crazy contagious disease of mine. Generally speaking, ordinary people rarely catch it, so you don't need to avoid me. Many people did not understand what kind of disease Nyosho Longtok had caught. As a result, what it meant was that behind his careless behavior on the surface, two of his great disciples had already realized this lineage of Dzogchen accomplishment. As for others, although he was manifesting certain behaviors, many people did not accept them. It also means this. In the Chinese Han tradition, there are also indeed some great accomplished masters. When we were learning the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch the other day, we basically learned that there are many, many great accomplished masters. And the behaviors of these great accomplished masters are usually very difficult for those who study the Vinaya to accept. Certain behaviors in the Zen tradition are indeed very difficult to accept. They happen when masters have reached inner realizations, but not everyone acts this way. Therefore, in Vajrayana, it is not that everyone must practice such behaviors. So, regarding careless behavior, if you act this way without realization, it becomes the cause of ruining both yourself and others. Conversely, once realization is mastered, it is no longer necessary to intentionally utilize the ambrosias. You see, it is already explained here. Once you achieve great enlightenment, at this time, you do not need to do careless behaviors, nor do you need to accept the five nectars. None of these are needed. Nevertheless, taking one's level of understanding into consideration and relying upon them as much as possible will support the view. This point is critical. You must evaluate your own capacity and stage. This resembles training in the skill of swordsmanship, where one gradually makes use of wood, metal, and finally an actual sword. It is just like Shaolin Kung Fu. When you learn martial arts with a sword at the very beginning, before your moves are practiced and skilled, you use wooden swords to spar with each other. When you reach a certain level, you use metal swords, which still will not hurt the other person. Only at the very end do you use real swords, because once a sharp sword makes contact, it can easily cut either yourself or the opponent to pieces. Only when your moves are extremely practiced and skilled can you use a real sword. Therefore, certain behaviors in the secret mantra must also follow the stages. If you cannot even use a wooden sword, yet you go straight to a real sword, you will definitely chop off your own head. It is very dangerous. But it doesn't mean that because of this danger you can never use it. It is not like that either. So it is just like learning martial arts. In Vajrayana, the way to take certain afflictions as the path is also step by step. You must follow your own stage and cannot generalize. This is very important. Without these 10 branch samayas, then the practice of the specifically swift and practical path, such as taking afflictions as the path itself and so forth, will not occur. Actually, regarding the 10 branch commitments we discussed earlier, if you don't practice them or don't understand them, you will not know how to take afflictions as the path, and you will not accomplish this swift and practical path. Practiced in this way, when afflictions themselves arise as wisdom, the afflictions become the nature of the truth of the path. If we practice according to these principles of the 5 poisons as the 5 wisdoms, and accepting the 5 nectars, then the afflictions themselves are wisdom. After this, the truth of origin is transformed into the nature of the truth of the path. Originally, the truth of origin is karma and afflictions, while the truth of the path is wisdom. Since the nature of karma and afflictions is originally wisdom, there is no need to deliberately abandon this truth of origin. It directly transforms into wisdom. In addition, when the karmic aggregates arise as pure wisdom, suffering becomes the nature of awakening. In true practice, the 5 aggregates are the 5 Buddhas, and suffering turns into wisdom. But if you haven't realized the practice, suffering is still suffering, the aggregates remain impure, and you are still trapped by your afflictions and karma. That's just how it is when the practice isn't there. Now, for those who are practicing well, I could really tell during our recent classes and oral presentation sessions that some people, indeed, after hearing many of the principles inside, already understood them. This is very good. In the future, if there are various causes and conditions to spread this thought to others, not only is there hope for your own liberation, it will even bring limitless light to others as well. From this you can understand, in reliance upon the branch samayas, The profound conduct of mantra as well becomes naturally present in the stream of mind. Once you know that the 5 poisons are wisdom and master the proper stages and boundaries of not abandoning these nectars we discussed today, then the profound behaviors and views of secret mantra will easily arise within your own mind stream. If the root and branch samayas are listed extensively as it clearly explains in other texts, then there are 360. This seems to be laid out clearly in Omniscient Longchen Pa's extended commentary on the Guhyagarbha Tantra. For instance, among the 5 root samayas mentioned earlier, not abandoning the unsurpassed is divided into wisdom and skillful means. Wisdom is then split into 3 vajras: the Vajra body, Vajra speech, and Vajra mind. Skillful means is also split into body, speech, and mind, making it 6 Vajras. Each of these 6 Vajras is further divided into 5: body, speech, mind, qualities, and activities. If you multiply these by 5, the total comes to 30. Adding these 30 to the wisdom and skillful means mentioned earlier gives 32. Then multiplying these 32 by the 5 root samayas, there are 160. Next, for the branch samayas, there are not abandoning the 5 poisons and not abandoning the 5 nectars. Each of them is divided into wisdom and skillful means. Wisdom and skillful means are also divided into body, speech, mind, qualities, and activities. For example, wisdom is divided into body, speech, mind, qualities, and activities, and skillful means is also divided into body, speech, mind, qualities, and activities. This makes 20. With the 10 branch samayas, the total comes to 200. So in total, there are 360. There is such a way of calculating. That is the general method of calculation. In short, not transgressing the meaning of great purity and evenness is the king of all samayas, which actually accomplishes awakening. In short, the meaning of great purity and great evenness is the ultimate samaya that brings direct Buddhahood. It is the king of all samayas. In fact, the king of all samayas is that you must understand primordial purity and primordial emptiness. If divisions concerning the stages of samaya that both directly and indirectly benefit this awakening were to be listed, it would be limitless, since there are countless levels of samayas to tame the limitless concepts of sentient beings. There are so many of them if we break them down extensively, just like what is described in Lama Yang Tig, where they can number in the hundreds of thousands. They are truly vast. As long as people have different thoughts, there will be different remedies to tame them, and every single remedy can be considered a samaya. Looked at that way, the list of samaya is truly infinite. All right, we will stop here for today.
Bandharangara Padmasada Bandharangara Padmasada